In this video, we're going to take a look at the Noodler's Ahab. So let's jump straight to the end with my thoughts on this pen. Let's start off with the most obvious thing that tends to be overblown in these reviews. This pen does have a smell to it, but I don't find the smell to be as offensive as it has been described many times. It's almost as if we're reaching a point that what we're trying to do is see if people can have the worst description of what the smell is. You can wash this pen with a little bit of vinegar and get that smell to go mostly entirely away, and given some time, it'll go. This is a very inexpensive pen that I find that I do continue to use a lot in my daily writing, despite having some very expensive pens that can go with it. It is a tinkerer's pen, so if you like to get in there and really be able to mess with some things, this is a great pen to do it. Not a good pen for somebody who doesn't want that. So that's what you have to start with. I enjoy writing with it. I find it to be a pleasant experience, and if you don't like the nib, it easily changes with other nibs. You then get back to that tinkerer's. You have to be willing to heat set the feed. Not the end of the world and not difficult to do. I haven't minded doing it, and I own a couple of these pens for that very reason. I find it easier to heat set it to a nib that I want to use on it, and then just move on and select the one that has the nib that I like. Now that we know how I feel about the Noodler's Ahab, let's see how I got to that opinion, starting with the unboxing. The Noodler's Ahab comes in a box like this. Very straightforward, and the box is largely used for most every one of the pens that you can get from Noodler's. It's nice because it's minimal packaging that you can throw away without feeling like you're throwing away what you've paid for. The box is just there to house the pen and the instructions, and I really like the artwork on the instructions for this pen. With the pen out of the box, we need to get to the nib. And as long as it doesn't take 20 turns to uncap it, I'm generally okay. So how many turns does it take to uncap this pen? The Noodler's Ahab takes 1, 2, and a quarter turns to uncap. It does take a little bit more to uncap this pen than I would prefer in the turns. I find close to 2 to be just a little much. But thankfully, it holds being wet while out in the air for quite a bit of time. So I don't recap it in between note-taking while writing, which deals with the uncapping and the number of turns. This gets us to the nib. This pen has a steel flex nib on it. Noodler's, when they came out with their flex nib, really got people to be more interested in an area that was interested in. The complaint becomes that the Noodler's flex nib isn't a true vintage flex, which it never tried to be. It tried to be a pen that can give some line variation, which it does, and it does well in normal writing. Now, let's ink this pen up. The Noodler's Ahab is a syringe type filler that holds approximately 2 milliliters of ink, or you can use their reusable 308 cartridges that holds approximately 3.5 milliliters of ink. The ink for today is Robert Oster's Honeybee. Every way you can ink this pen up holds a tremendous amount of ink. It really is very nice, and with that, I find it great for doing artwork, and the line variation the nib gives is an added bonus to that. Another bonus to me is that I don't worry about staining its cartridge or its filling mechanism. As a habit, I don't normally post my pens, but some people prefer to post pens, and some pens need to be posted to use comfortably. You can post this pen if you want to. It's a tight fit to post. It does make it a little bit larger, but I do think there's not really a need to. The pen tends to be large enough to use without posting, as I don't really post most of my pens. If you enjoy videos like this, then be sure to hit the subscribe button. Now, the important part, the writing sample. This is a pen that if, while tinkering with it, you don't line things up correctly, the ink flow can go crazy on you. Now, I have experienced that in the past, but the other side is I wrote with one of these pens for a year with shimmer inks and never had a clogging issue. This is an incredibly wet pen to write with, and when using more standard nibs that have been heat set, it writes incredibly well and super wet. And considering how many people like super wet pens, I would think this pen would actually be more popular in the opinions that get put out there, especially for how inexpensive it is. I enjoy using the standard nib that comes on it, and I enjoy some of the models that I have with some other nibs. More frequently, I actually use the Noodler's nib, and that's because I don't find the writing experience to be unpleasant. It is much more feedbacky than most of the pens that I use, and that's because it is an untipped nib on mine, and again, that's not really a problem for me. Many stubs are untipped, and I've even considered stubbing this one to get that really wet flow and that stub quality in the writing. I think this pen, if people can just get over the exaggerations of the smell, is a great pen for people, especially if you want to start playing with understanding how the pen works. So affordable. I absolutely love it, enough that I have 3 of them. Now for something a bit more standard in comparing writing size. I use Mnemosyne Blue to do this. Here's how it compares to a Jowo Extra Fine on the left, a medium in the middle, and a 1.1 stub on the right. The nib comparison that you're seeing is really done without putting any pressure at all onto the nib to cause any real flexing that it does give. And if you wanted to get more line variation, you can, and the complaint people have is the amount of pressure. Now, I do get some line variation without putting a ton of pressure, just not all the way to that triple broad. But how does the writing size of this nib compare to the other nibs I've used? Looking at the writing of a Noodler's Ahab with their flex nib, here it is next to another Noodler's Ahab with the Fountain Pen Revolution Gold Flex, a Pilot Vanishing Point with a medium nib, a Parker Jotter with a medium nib, a Pelikan P200 with a medium nib, and a Visconti Van Gogh also with a medium nib. So it isn't a review without some size comparisons. Here it is capped, here it is uncapped, and here it is posted. I find the size of it in my hand to be very enjoyable to use. It is girthy enough that I really like how it feels in my hand. I do wish that I could get one in some nicer materials, but the variety that's out there is certainly making it easy to find ones that you would enjoy a great deal. I've found 3. At this point, we have a dirty pen that we need to clean. Be sure to check out the next pen review when we take a look at the Aurora Optima. If you want to be able to support not just my channel, but any reviewer, then when you make a purchase, be sure to tell that retailer where you heard about it. Thanks for watching.